I don't know what it is with me and indie horror at the moment. Maybe it's the fact I made a Voices of the Void video that I really enjoyed, and it performed better than expected, that I felt a need to dive into more games like it. Vaguely. So I racked my brain on where I could begin on that journey, and I remembered a game a friend of mine was playing the demo of a few months back. Well, turns out, No, I'm Not a Human released in September. It seems to be incredibly well liked, and to satisfy an itch I didn't realise I had, I decided it was worth 12 of my finest sterling. So fueled on generational man flu and pure grit, I fired it up, and what I experienced was something deeply thought-provoking, at least when it wasn't being utterly insane. In fact, I enjoyed this apocalyptic letting strangers into your house simulator so much, I actually started lucid dreaming about it. And while that's no doubt alarming to my therapist, who secretly doesn't exist, it was actually perhaps one of the best fever dreams I've ever had, which I say having remembered virtually none of it, and I suppose the rest of this video will be dedicated to highlighting how concerning that is. So let's dive in. So what is the premise of No, I'm Not a Human? Simply put, the sun has become the universe's largest deep fat fryer, and strange solar activity is causing temperatures during the day to skyrocket to dangerous levels, forcing everybody to bunker down in random abodes, anywhere to stay out of the sun during the day. And our job is to let people into our house whom we think are safe, which we'll want to do even if it does sound strange, because the apocalypse is only half the issue. The other half is there are strange human-appearing creatures on the prowl named visitors, and true to their name, they like to visit and find their way into people's homes. They imitate humans almost perfectly, and must be identified via telltale signs. Sounds lovely. Well, these visitors are murderous creatures. Once they've infiltrated a humble abode, such as our depressing cesspit, they isolate and kill human occupants. So we'll know if one's present when we go to bed and are notified that somebody seems to have died in the night. And then when we investigate, we'll find an occupant's body neatly cut up into 3 trash bags, which is nice of the visitor, to be honest. They clean up after themselves at least. But the point is, the visitors make it dangerous to live alone, but none more so than the very obvious pale half-naked one that more or less spells out his own nature to us from jump. If we're home alone, matey boy over here will kick down our front door, just about bend enough to make it inside, and introduce us to a fate worse than death. In order to prevent that, we must admit random people into our home and simply hope they're human to stay safe. Fortunately, letting in a visitor isn't the end of the world, because they never go for us personally, and we can test them to see if they're visitors or human. And we do this by engaging in the sinful behaviour of paying attention to the news, and will be drip-fed characteristics that may indicate if somebody is a visitor. Unfortunately, none of these signs are dead giveaways. Instead, they're more subjective, things like perfect white teeth, which may just mean somebody has a really good dentist, dirt under the fingernails, which of course means somebody could just have a hands-on job, bloodshot eyes that may sprout for a plethora of reasons as well, hairless armpits, somebody might just be really on top of looking after themselves, or indeed they might have a peculiar aura when photographed, provided the protagonist knows how to use a camera properly, and given the pictures, I'm not entirely convinced that's the case. Identifying visitors is for the most part guesswork. It's impossible to do at the front door, most of the time, and from playthrough to playthrough, who is a visitor and who's a human typically changes. And since not letting people in will result in this fella coming and ruining your week, all you can really do is let people in, test them, and if you're unsatisfied, blow them away with your infinitely loaded shotgun. If we made the right choice, we'll get this snazzy graphic letting us know, and then we can either rest easy knowing we dispatched a visitor, or live with the guilt of having killed someone who wasn't. Either way, this process of elimination is how we kill time in the day. Engaging in these tests depletes our energy, allowing us to sleep and progress to night, but in the event there's nothing to do, or indeed nothing you want to do, you can always smash a beer for the same effect.
Beers.
World's gone to shit, but a cold beer still hits, right?
Yeah.
Beers. But that's not all there is to this game, thankfully. There's an entire story that unfolds as we look out our windows at night. First, it just appears to be eerie silence mixed with humanity adjusting to now living primarily at night, but it quickly descends into more horrifying visuals, including your neighbour's house burning down, the pale visitor taunting us, and the increasingly mysterious activities of a government organisation known as FEMA. And these guys routinely come to the door to take people away as test subjects. You know, to help. because nothing screams I'm here to help quite like an expressionless yet angry-looking gas mask. And this forces us to constantly renew our guests as to not run out and be liable to this guy kicking our door in. And that allows us to familiarise ourselves with many of this game's uncanny characters. For instance, the world's sanest cat lady, John Baseball. I'm definitely not hiding something, I promise. The world's scariest nun, and believe me when I say that's a list. I'm not sure which of this man's parents was the fish. Even in the apocalypse, I am not foolish enough to fall for your pseudo-witchcraft, the untrustworthy hipster. Oh, he was a visitor.
Oh, wow.
You know what, killing people indiscriminately is a great way to detect visitors. Preston Garvey, fallen on hard times. Somebody's nan, I assume, Prince Philip. That kid from Toy Story, on fentanyl. I've seen the face of God and it was weeping. A literal Redditor, Cameron. The human growth hormone hoarder. How the f*** did you get a wheelchair onto my elevated porch? I'm quite certain I've seen you working the till at Heron Foods. You know it's the apocalypse when the cultists are the saner characters.
I scratched out my eyes for narrative impact.
And many, many more. And all of these characters we let in have their own stories to tell regardless of whether or not they're human. My favourite is learning about this hairy bloke's own encounters with the Pale Visitor. These stories help us humanise these people. We can believe that they, like us, are just trying to survive in an increasingly unsurvivable world. And while them fragmenting their personal stories over the course of multiple days means FEMA will almost certainly whisk them away before they've told us everything, it does give us something to weigh up beyond our deduction. It's one thing to feel good when we get it right, when our distrust is rewarded with the truth, but what happens when we get it wrong? The moral implication is that story has ended. So is the shotgun truly the most effective and soothing method for dispatching this visitor problem? If you're torn on it, you can always slap a suspected visitor with a FEMA notice, meaning FEMA will take them away next time they come by. And provided you let the strange woman with the cat in, you could feed the cat in the meantime because, for some unexplained reason, that prevents any deaths from occurring in the house that night. I don't know what powers this cat has, it may be hideous, but I'm glad it's here. You're coming with me. We're going to Narnia. Now, unfortunately, it does have to be said the game can be a tad sloppy with its deductions, with them mostly boiling down to either being incredibly familiar with the differences between the human variant and visitor variant of any character on a given playthrough, or just simply hazarding a guess. But if anything, that plays into the overarching theme of being crammed into this claustrophobic house with people you cannot trust. More often than not, you're not going to get a concrete answer out of any tests. The details we get on the news are not red herrings as such, but none of these test criteria will crop up 100% of the time. Simply put, the paranoia cannot be satisfied. There comes a point where we have to commit to shooting somebody in the face or leaving them alone, and that typically arrives before you're certain. And yeah, from a certain perspective, that does inject a slightly uncomfortable amount of luck into whether or not the people in your house will end up being human or visitors, but I don't think deduction is specifically what this game is going for as much as distrust itself. I say this because, well, like I said, it's all guesswork, but also whether or not there are visitors in your home come the end only really influences the 2 of the 10 endings that occur if you manage to survive the entire 14 days, meaning 80% of the endings are attached to other criteria, and the parameters of the visitors otherwise are quite forgiving. For instance, they only really start killing if there are 2 of them in the house, meaning if you wake up to bloody trash bags strewn about the shop, your admission policy is likely underzealous, and if you're attached to any of these grotesque characters, you can always feed the cat. But like I said, there's so much more to this game overall than just making it to the end with a house full of humans. We have the protagonist's home to investigate. We know he's a loner who doesn't really much enjoy the company of others to begin with, and we don't know where all the people who clearly have been in his life in the past have gone. This naturally reclusive man now has to share his space with people he has more than a baseline of reasons to not trust, enhancing the oppressive vibes as we inhabit an individual who's not likely to make the most of such a situation. We also have various means to learn about the world's predicament. We can look out the windows and see society literally crumbling. Our interactions with others give us fragments to piece together, and watching the news keeps us informed on the current events. We can also intercept communications via the radio, all of which don't allow us to understand what's going on, but they give us a good outline. And then of course there's the mystery of what is it that FEMA are actually up to. At first, this shadowy government organisation plays the facade of being there to help, but as the world's situation worsens, this ruse's value dissipates. Before you know it, they're showing far less respect, they're pinching more people, referring to them as test subjects. This is neither the time nor place to put up with a power trip, but it's certainly an opportunity. The only thing that's clear is these people, the ones positioned as the only ones who can help, are not in fact here to help. We are on our own. With the cat, of course, and that again enhances this introvert's position, that crushing sense that we can't trust anyone. We can't trust the news, we certainly can't trust FEMA, we can't trust the very people in our own home, and we can't even trust ourselves to judge them properly because we're not equipped to. The most trustworthy character we're going to encounter is the pale visitor himself, because at the very least he's direct with his ominous nature. Everybody else is either too eager to win your trust, too protective over their own, or too otherwise esoteric for it to matter either way. And that brings me to discussing the characters we encounter who aren't looking to gain admission to our home, or indeed take any of our occupants away. The bald guy comes along to ponder his crystal cranium, and gives us snippets of some kind of prophecy. What we do with that information is entirely up to us. This funky old wizard that I simply refer to as the Fungal Lord seems to think the mushrooms have something to do with the apocalypse, or at the very least they're staging an apocalypse of their own. Following his instructions leads us to an existentially confusing ending. I suppose in a similar way, following the prophecy guy leads us to a network of tunnels beneath our house in the basement, where we'll find a random dude just chilling by a hole. I'm not entirely sure how he got there, and the idea of there just being an elaborate tunnel network down here is equally baffling. Who made this? The visitors? Then there's the cult guy whose brand I reckon would benefit from some sunshine and rainbows. He doesn't want admission to the gaff for himself, God knows where he's staying, but he does deposit 3 of his fellow cult members so they can camp on our sofa and perform rituals of some variety, I suppose, and despite appearances, those guys are actually quite sound, oddly. Not that I'd be especially thrilled to have them babysit my firstborn child. Then there's the vigilante, who basically roams the night, slaughtering any visitors he encounters. Of course, he isn't too bothered if they actually are visitors. I think he just likes killing people. He's simply using the hysteria of the cataclysm as an excuse to justify his rampage, something we'll become all too aware of if we fail one of his visitor checks on us, highlighting the unreliability of the criteria we ourselves have been using, shortening the moral gap. Like him, at best we're crazy. At worst, we too are psychopaths. The message is loud and clear. The visitors running amok aren't our only problem. Simply being human doesn't make you not a threat. The whole point, of course, is this world is hopelessly crumbling. There is nowhere to run. There's no sanctuary and there's virtually nothing to save. This tiny building we once called home is now little more than a survival bunker. I'm not entirely sure how it hasn't burned down. It's practically made entirely out of wood. How has the sun not pulverized this? But the point stands that the protagonist's home has become a claustrophobic tomb. All we're doing is living in denial, waiting for death to catch up with us. And that comes together with the grotesque visuals and heavy oppressive sound design to create this genuine sense of despair. A misery we have no choice but to add to. Being the owner of this property, we're in a position of power, and the people we encounter, largely like us, are just trying to survive. We can run the risk of offering them shelter. Like, you open this door and you're immediately met with, "I've shit the bed." Stay at that. Or you can deny these people sanctuary. Chances are good you're denying them survival too. Or you can let them in and then rip their lives away at the end of a shotgun. Yep, you're going to be shot. The impact of that, of course, is carried through this game's excellent atmosphere. While the visuals are incredibly unnerving, they have a point. The music is somber and droning, like the audible hallucinations of a fever dream. The game may certainly have its flaws. If you went in expecting a competent deduction system, I wouldn't necessarily go saying it has one. And FEMA notoriously show up to lock you out of certain endings at the last hurdle, but this game is great at conveying hopelessness and despair. Dread not for any particular horrific entity, but rather because it feels like the world is quite literally ending, and people are still trying to survive despite the sense of futility. It's not a game I'd typically go for, but to be honest, it's been refreshing to play. I've even enjoyed it. I've completed 7 of the 10 endings the game has, and there's no point in which the experience compromises on what it's trying to convey. and while I'm sure I'll need some form of psychological assistance to get it out of my head, it is a wonderful piece of art. But I'm going to end today's video here. There's obviously a fair bit more to the game than I've gone over. After all, it's not my prerogative to lay it all out. If you come away from this video having not played the game and not feeling like you need to because you've seen it all, I've overdone it, haven't I? So instead, I shall leave you with this recommendation. I thank you all for watching, really hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. Of course, only if you want to. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, please take care, and goodbye.